Hello and welcome to the Grand Theft World podcast. I am your host and navigator, Tony Myers. It is June 5th, 2022. We have a jam-packed episode for you tonight. While everyone was focused in the past 2 weeks on the World Economic Forum's annual meeting, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, like magic, there's the Bilderberg meetings in Washington, D.C. at the Mandarin Oriental Hotel, I believe.
Outside of the Mandarin Hotel, where there's a big meeting happening.
Yeah, any kind of reactions? You guys are being very kind of tight-lipped about what's going on here. And we would love to have a conversation, and I could give you my ID card. But anything you guys want to say about your participation here to the general public? Because people are going to see this. And it's a red light. You don't want to walk on a red light. But do you guys have any kind of comments about your participation? The people are going to see this. They're going to be like, what were they doing? What was going on? We have some questions. And they're like, why is there so much secrecy? It doesn't have to be, if you just get some comments from the press. And I think it would be good overall to have some kind of, transparency, some kind of like, oh, hey, this is what's going on. This is our conversation.
There's a press release.
It's very
there's a
big.
lot on the press release related to Europe, for instance, Ukraine.
Yeah.
What
was the most interesting?
That affects everyone in Europe. What came up with regard to Ukraine?
What was the most interesting thing talked about on the press release? Watch out! Stop! You're gonna get. Come on! I could give you. I'm available for tour guides too. I could give you guys a walk if you guys want. But be careful. Don't run onto the street. There's cars here. We have an American medical system. You got to be careful. If you go into the hospital, man, they're going to give you a big bill.
The Bilderbergers. I don't know how that happened to manifest like magic out of nowhere, but that's the way in which these individuals operate. While we're all hyper focused on one thing, right, all its sleight of hand, smoke and mirror style tricks, all of a sudden, poof, they're doing something else. So we're going to get into that. We're going to do a deep dive of a number of individuals that'll be speaking on that, including Burmis, Al Jazeera, and Jay Dyer, getting into the history a little bit as well of the Bilderberg meetings.
And the NATO chief is there, Jens Stoltenberg. Okay, prepare for the long haul. Remember, China, Ukraine, Russia, they're on the agenda. It's a big deal, okay? We have to acknowledge these things. So I was showing footage right here of Michael Pompeo at Bilderberg in Switzerland, actually en route to get onto a boat to give a speech in a castle, Jared Kushner and others there. So this transcends left and right. And I was listening to Harrison Smith earlier today, and to Roger Stone's credit, he was finally throwing Michael Pompeo to the wolves. Well, you should have been doing that for some time. Okay? Michael Pompeo, just like about every high-level person within that Trump administration that they didn't burn, the Boltons, the Mattises, right, the Bill Barrs, was as deep state globalist as it gets. And again, he's the one giving the speech at Bilderberg 2019 at a castle like a supervillain. Peter Thiel, the guy that believes in offshore testing of you-know-whats. We don't want to say that word here. Sidestepping U.S. safety rules. Well, guess what? He's represented there all the time. Eric Schmidt's represented there all the time. All right? Kissinger is there again all the time. But there's also representatives from Palantir. Okay, Palantir just getting one of those big Army data platform contracts, and talk about track, trace, database, global surveillance. That's what we're talking about. When you talk about Internet of Bodies, that's what we're talking about. Okay? So, head of the CIA, William Burns, also there. Also there. Think about that. Look at all these people. Our buddy, the CEO of Pfizer, also there. And remember, you got your 20 or so core members, and then you've got about 100 or so that come every once in a while and are basically sent out to influence. This is an influence operation. Okay? These roundtable groups, consolidation of power. Ann Applebaum, plenty of people from the media here. This is the woman from The Atlantic that's attending. A lot of people from The Economist as well. All right? And when one of their big things is continuity of government, aka the shadow government and the economy, followed by disruption of the global financial system, when you know that they want what? A carbon-based social credit score, global blockchain currency.
Who are the Bilderberg Group? And why do they meet every year? What do they talk about? And why the secrecy? Do they intend to rule the world?
So over there, the world's power elite are gathering.
We all talk about a democracy that isn't there.
People want to know what's going on, what we're talking about.
A global tyranny that would have made George Orwell wince.
Today is an important day because we have Bilderberg. Bilderberg is going on. Of course, it's secret for many years in the sense that people kind of knew it existed, and it was one of these big international steering committee types of meetings with corporate elite, a lot of the heads of media, a lot of people from the Trilateral Commission, from the CFR, and they would meet at Bilderberg, but the press would typically not report this. I mean, you would think that the most powerful people in the world, the wealthiest CEOs, getting together and discussing global policy would be something worthy of media attention, and yet we would only find typically kind of occasional stories here and there. Maybe in the European press, there might be a story here or there. But nobody really talked about it because, of course, there was quite a bit of clampdown and it was intentionally not discussed. But to find out the real origins of Bilderberg, of course, there's quite a few books out there now, but most famously, which you guys have heard me talk about many times in the fourth hour, is David Rockefeller's own memoirs. And to really understand the purpose of these institutions, steering committees, NGOs, think tanks, et cetera, they all kind of fall under the banner of this global elite plan. It helps to go to the man himself, David Rockefeller. Now, the Council on Foreign Relations itself was set up as one of these kind of steering committees in 1921 at the behest of the Rockefellers. And it was intended to be an entity that would help steer global policy modeled on what Dr. Carroll Quigley talks about in his books on Chatham House, on the Royal Institute for International Affairs, on Pratt House, and so forth. All of these things are kind of models of what they call roundtable groups. And the roundtable groups are, again, a strategy, a type of governance coming out of the British Empire. In the waning of the British Empire, you have the rise of the American Empire to replace it. And no figure, in my view, is more important than David Rockefeller. I mean, I think he's really the pivot man here. Obviously, other families are important. Obviously, the joining of the Rothschild and Rockefeller fortunes some years ago was an important move. But in the early phases of the 20th century, it's really the Rockefeller family that dominates this whole arena. And they also extended this influence to many other meetings, which, again, David Rockefeller openly talks about in this famous chapter. Now, maybe you don't want to read this big, boring 600-page, 700-page book, which is understandable, 500 pages, excuse me. But if you want to really understand what's going on, you just need to look at one chapter, and that's chapter 27, and that's what we're going to talk about first. Then we'll look at some more about Bilderberg. But the whole chapter is called Proud Internationalist. Proud Internationalist. And the idea here is that the world needs to be restructured according to when you hear people talk about the New World Order, this is what's being talked about. Okay, it's not a shadowy, unknown thing. It's not some thing that people are just throwing around. Oh, I don't know what it is, but it's just this term that somebody. No, it's a very precise, very clear, public thing in all of these big, fat, global elite texts. And chapter 27 is all about that. It's called Proud Internationalist. And it begins with a quote, and it says, "In my lifetime, the pursuits as an internationalist might best be summarized by my extraordinary day in 1995. And what he's talking about in 1995 relates to the CFR, the United Nations, and what he calls a kind of capitalist mechanism for restructuring the world. It's a new way to structure the world. And he says, now, a lot of people don't like this. A lot of people have said, hey, you're a part of a communist conspiracy. And he says, it's neither capitalist nor communist. It's a new way of approaching all this. Now, he is a monopoly capitalist. But if you guys, everybody knows, right, he wrote the 2 editorials where he famously said that Mao's China is a great experiment, nothing wrong with it. We know that the OSS trained Mao's guerrillas. And so a lot of people at Yale, Skull and Bones, they were actually for Maoism. And they did that to restructure and change the landscape of China. And David Rockefeller has chapters in the middle of this book, by the way, about putting Chase Bank in communist China, restructuring China, his positive attitude towards China, because he felt that it could also be a eugenics-based technocratic government eventually, right? And that's, of course, where we see China going, all at the behest of these Western powers and support.
We have, what does it mean? What is a woman? What does it mean to be a woman? Can we even define what a woman is? An interesting documentary from the Daily Wire crew, specifically Matt Walsh, dropped this week, hoping to, I hope he can elucidate the subtlety around the definition of what it means to be a woman and how difficult, apparently, that is to define.
I'm a husband. I'm a father of 4. I host a talk show. I give speeches. I write books. I like to make sense of things. A woman is not anything in particular.
There is not one particular thing.
It could be many things to many people.
Some women have penises, right? Some men have vaginas.
I like scented candles, and I've watched Sex and the City.
Yeah.
How do I know if I'm a woman?
That's a great question.
You're not a scientist. You're not a gender studies major.
No.
How do you know that you're a man?
I guess because I got a dick.
Can a man become a woman?
I'm not a woman, so I can't really answer that.
Women only know what women are.
Are you a cat?
No.
Can you tell me what a cat is? Do you want to tell us what a woman is?
I'm a biological woman that medically transitioned to appear like a male. I will never be a man.
And so they go on the internet and they're told that all of their problems will be solved if they become a man.
So you worry that there could be a sort of social contagion element of this?
A teeny tiny bit, maybe.
It got me at 42. Your child doesn't have a chance.
And you're affirming it with hormones that have never been used in this way.
Puberty blockers, which are completely reversible.
Completely reversible.
One of the drugs used is Lupron, right? Which has actually been used to chemically castrate sex offenders.
You know what? I'm not sure that we should continue with this interview.
So you don't want to talk about the drugs that you give to kids, or?
How can they be removing the healthy breasts of 15-year-old girls?
There are masculine girls. There are feminine boys. What are we going to do about that? Carve them up?
How can this whole thing be happening, Matt?
I wanted us to have a safe place to be able to talk about this.
Part of me wants to ask why you care so much.
I care about the truth. I care about children. I care about the women who are having their opportunities stolen from them.
Is it transphobic to tell the truth?
The interview's over. Let's turn off the cameras.
Excuse me.
Well, they're fair. I just wanted to know, what is a woman?
And you're not going to find out.
Based on what I'm saying, would you ever want to move to America?
They say no, never.
Last week, of course, we played a clip from, I think it was Jimmy Dore, played a clip from Bill Maher, showing how much of a trend this whole trans situation has become.
And finally, new rule: if something about the human race is changing at a previously unprecedented rate, we have to at least discuss it. Broken down over time, the LGBT population of America seems to be roughly doubling every generation. According to a recent Gallup poll, less than 1% of Americans born before 1946, that's Joe Biden's generation, identify that way. 2.6% of boomers do, 4.2% of Gen X, 10.5% of millennials, and 20.8% of Gen Z. Which means if we follow this trajectory, we will all be gay in 2054.
And Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla and Klaus Schwab, they seem to be upset at all the conspiracy theorists around the vaccines and around their agenda for total technocratic dictatorship and control. So we're going to get a little bit into, why are they so upset? Why are they so upset at us conspiracy theorists?
This is the guy, the head of the World Economic Forum, that Klaus Schwab. And this is Bourla. He is the CEO of Pfizer. Right now, he's a veterinarian. And to me, he's just like a mini version of this guy. Right? They both have an accent. Well, here, watch.
With a vaccine, but we knew that there is a very fanatic group of anti-vaxxers, that will go after us no matter what. They will claim that the sun didn't go up because people were vaccinated, and that created issues with the crop, so I'm suing you. And one thing it is to sue you in the US, another thing is to sue you in a country where the legal system is not up to that standards, or in Switzerland, right? So I think...
So first of all, he's complaining that they're being sued. Last time I checked, they can't be sued for the vaccines. In the United States, anyway. You can't sue them.
He said it's in places where their legal system isn't up to standard.
Isn't up to the standard. And what would that standard be? That standard would be you need a legal system that can be bought by big pharma, and then you get blanket immunity from prosecution. That's the kind of standards we're looking for in a legal system, where you buy the government and the regulatory body that is supposed to impose those regulations on you and let people sue you for injury. No, you buy them, you get blanket immunity, and oh, what an advanced form of judicial system they have in the United States. That's what he's saying.
That will go after us no matter what. They will claim that the sun didn't go up because people were vaccinated, and that created issues with the crop.
No, what they claimed was that they got vaccine injured by the vaccine, that it gave them myocarditis and other problems like that I had. You know, neurological problems, stuff like that. Women having problems with their menstrual cycle, stuff like that. That's what they're saying. That's what they're saying. They're not saying that the sun didn't come up. They're saying that your product injured them. You know, like you did that document dump where you didn't want to release your vaccine trials for 75 years. You remember that?
Could you be talking about that too, by the way, the suing them to get the documents?
Yeah, they probably sued them. Yeah, they had to be sued to get, they had to sue the FDA because the FDA is captured by Pfizer. So Pfizer actually is dictating to the FDA. You know, that's how it's not the other way around. The FDA is not dictating to Pfizer. Pfizer is dictating to Joe Biden and the administration, the Democratic Party, the FDA, and the CDC. So just so you know, that's not the other way around. It's called regulatory capture. And this isn't new. This isn't a new idea. Everybody knew this and accepted this until we got to coronavirus, until COVID. Everybody totally accepted that the FDA, it's called corporate capture. I mean, it's regulatory capture. Everybody admitted this. And so that's why they're not being sued. Because they own the government and the politicians and the regulatory bodies. They own them. That's why. And so now he's got to make up this fucking bullshit about people are suing them because the sun didn't come up. Okay.
The phrasing of that sentence is just incredible.
Yes.
As Kurt pointed out.
So I'm suing you. And one thing it is to sue you in the US, another thing is to sue you in a country.
It's one thing to sue you in the U.S. where we own the government. It's another thing to sue you in another country where we don't own the government. And then they actually have a fair trial and we're going to get screwed.
The legal system is not up to that standards, or in Switzerland, right? So I think that's behind us. Everything went okay, and now I think we can move on.
Everything went okay. We didn't get sued in the United States. Nobody's really suing our ass off that bad. And we pulled one over on them. Wait till you get to your 15th booster. Am I right? Everything that's behind us now. Now we're going to make new coronavirus vaccine. We're going to sell it with new scare tactics, maybe monkeypox.
Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. And we're going to go to, as we always do, with Luke Rudowski. Now, Luke normally does a Sunday show, but he was with a buddy of his in Washington, D.C. at the Bilderberg conference, documenting what's going on there, getting some probably some interviews with people in the streets, trying to get an idea of are people aware, what's going on, who knows. So he's doing it back to his roots of guerrilla journalism. Shout out to Luke Rudowski from We Are Change, and that's who we're going to go to first. Let's go to Luke Rudowski from We Are Change.
It's like everything. It hides in plain sight. Epstein was hiding in plain sight. We all knew about him. We all knew what he was doing. But we had no one that was, legal aspect that would go after him. They were afraid of him. For whatever reason, they were afraid of him.
Oh, that's just John McCain's wife talking about how a large swath of the political and media establishment knew that a monster was out there hurting children, and they decided to look the other way. Yeah.
What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come